Let's jump right into this. Welcome to today's explainer. We've got a fascinating and honestly pretty provocative 2018 text by Xu Feng to unpack today. The core idea here? Modern nation-states are absolutely destined to vanish. It's a radical forecast, but it's built on this highly systematic theory analyzing the historical laws that make the demise of the state completely inevitable. And the real kicker? The explosive rise of artificial intelligence is the ultimate catalyst that's going to completely restructure human society on a global scale. We're going to explore the logic behind this massive claim right now.
So here's our blueprint for today. First, we'll look at the demise of states, then the historical evolution of society, followed by the forces erasing borders right now. After that, we'll dive into how AI is restructuring society, check out the author's specific stateless timeline, and finally, look at some citizen preparation.
All right, starting off with Section 1, the demise of states.
To really grasp where this radical theory comes from, we actually have to look way back to ancient prophecy. The author grounds this whole futuristic vision in the words of the ancient Chinese strategist Zhuge Liang, who predicted a time when the talented will be put to good use and the whole world will be one family. And according to the text, this isn't just hopeful poetry, it's presented as the inevitable law of human development. The argument is that rigid traditional structures, things like marriages, political parties, religions, and most importantly, states, are naturally decaying to make room for this unified global family.
Now, we have to look at how the author views the modern state, and it is a remarkably harsh perspective. The text argues that sure, it's totally natural to love your hometown, right, because of those emotional ties, but loving a state is fundamentally flawed. Why? Well, the author actually defines states as violent machines. They're described as outdated jails that basically keep people in perpetual bondage and severely restrict human civilization from leaping forward. On top of that, the author directly blames the very existence of states for military conflicts, massive resource consumption, and widespread ecological ruin.
Moving on to Section 2, historical evolution of society.
So the author grounds this impending collapse in what they see as absolute evolutionary law. Get this, back in 2002, the author predicted the disappearance of marriages and families, likening them to the archaic practice of foot binding in the Southern Song dynasty. Something that was totally normalized at the time but eventually seen as a symbol of backwardness. The author points to rising global divorce rates as proof that this historical pattern is happening right now. And by extension, this exact same evolutionary law applies to the nation-state. Just as primitive tribes naturally died out as society evolved, the modern state is viewed as an obsolete tribal structure that just has to fade away. To really hammer this inevitability home, the author offers a super compelling thought experiment. Think about ancient China during the Warring States period. It was divided into independent states like Qi, Chu, and Qin. But today, those are just unified provinces. The author asks, imagine if you still needed a visa and customs agents to travel between those regions today. It would be a nightmare for the average person. The text uses this to argue that, hey, the bankruptcy of states might be a total disaster for the rulers in power, but it's actually a massive evolutionary benefit for ordinary citizens who just want total freedom of movement across the globe.
Okay, Section 3, forces erasing national borders.
Take a look at this mind-boggling number, 2 billion. At the time this text was written, that represented Facebook's user base. The author views platforms like this not just as tech companies, but as invisible global states. The whole argument here is that as more and more citizens of the Earth connect through these global communities, aligning their lives and their work online rather than locally, well, existing physical borders are just going to gradually become completely meaningless. They'll exist in name only.
But it's not just social media. The text deliberately lists out a bunch of other non-state entities that are already taking over government functions. When SpaceX launched the Falcon Heavy rocket, they showed off capabilities that far exceeded those of major nations. The author reasons that if thousands of these private enterprises pop up, they could solve global problems without needing a state at all. We also see things like the Ubuntu movement in South Africa, proposals for massive federal republics combining the UK, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand, and literally thousands of independent spiritual and ecological communities. These are groups organizing their own food and healthcare, explicitly rejecting government control.
Which brings us to Section 4, AI restructuring human society. This is absolutely crucial.
The text points out that artificial intelligence is evolving at a geometric progression, and the author predicts that systems like AlphaGo will soon evolve into what they call super biological robots. And the metaphor used here is intense. The text claims that in the face of these robots, human intellect will basically be comparable to primitive mammals. Yeah, primitive mammals. This completely upends our foundational social structure, because if humans are no longer at the top of the intellectual hierarchy, it shatters the traditional ways we organize power and authority. To ground this futuristic claim in some immediate reality, the author cites statistics from Stanford professor Jerry Kaplan. And these numbers represent the staggering percentage of jobs projected to be replaced by AI. 47% in the United States and potentially over 70% in China. To put that into perspective, this isn't just an economic issue. If the vast majority of citizens are permanently pushed out of traditional labor, the entire social fabric that allows a state to function, to collect taxes and govern its people, it just collapses. The fundamental relationship between the citizen and the state completely evaporates. Because of all this, the author classifies AI as the ultimate black swan event, a highly improbable, unpredictable event that changes absolutely everything. The text asserts that we're going to wake up one day to a world that's advancing way too rapidly to even comprehend. And in this unrecognizable new reality, traditional governments will be utterly powerless to manage superintelligence or the social upheaval it brings. The author is certain they'll be swept into the History Museum within a decade of this AI takeover.
All right, moving to Section 5, the Stateless World Timeline.
So the author's timeline begins in 2018, which they mark as the start of a new era featuring large-scale soul purification and unimaginable climate changes. And this leads right into a really brutal decade, from 2028 to 2038. The text describes this as an era of unrestrained, cruel struggles for survival resources driven by countless refugees and widespread human misfortune. But interestingly, out of all this extreme turmoil, the author predicts things will actually calm down by 2048. Why? Because the Earth's population will be significantly smaller. From those ashes, a stateless world will finally be born, kicking off a millennium of harmony that eventually concludes in the year 3017.
Finally, Section 6, How Citizens Should Prepare.
To really understand the author's advice here, you have to understand their utter disdain for state authorities. The text features this incredibly vivid quote. Get a load of this. "It is no better to rely on a government than to rely on pigs. It is more useful to raise pigs than to raise a government." I mean, it's extreme for sure, but it perfectly illustrates the author's belief that relying on government promises right now is just a dangerous waste of precious time. So, what are the actionable steps? Step 1. Immediately stop working for your country and abandon that national identity. Don't view yourself as American or Japanese or anything else. Consider yourself an Earth citizen and join non-state communities today. Step 2. Physically relocate. The author explicitly advises escaping dense, unfair societies with scarce resources. And Step 3. Total self-reliance. Borrowing an old survivalist mantra, the author advises citizens to dig deep holes, accumulate grain extensively, and basically find your own way out before the super robots fully take over.
Wow, okay, it is a lot to process. A theory that blends ancient philosophy with futuristic AI dominance, predicting the total collapse of the countries we call home based on what the author sees as unavoidable historical evolution. So we're going to leave you with this to consider. Are the cracks we see in global politics today truly the inevitable end of the nation-state, just like this author suggests? Or are we simply witnessing the painful, chaotic birth of a new society that will ultimately be ruled by artificial intelligence? Think about the role your state plays in your life today, and how a super biological robot might completely change that tomorrow. Thanks for joining us for this explainer. Keep learning, and we'll see you next time.